CHAPTER 8 of the King's Daughter. The King's Daughter by Pansy. CHAPTER 8. Finding Recruits for the Temperance Army. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. The cracked bell in the old church steeple clanged faithfully on that Friday evening. Dell attended to the matter. She went herself to the sexton, and coaxed him into promising to ring it for just 10 minutes. She stood in the hall all ready, with one exception. She had failed to secure the promised "one anyway" as a surety of an audience. She had tried several persons, but they all with one accord began to make excuse. As she stood leaning against the doorway, wondering if there was not another last effort that she could make somewhere, a bright thought came to her. Sam Miller was at that moment sawing wood out in the wood yard. She could hear the lazy motion of his saw scraping back and forth. She could ask him. Of course it was more than likely that he wouldn't go, but it could do no harm to try. She ran out to him. "Sam," she said, gathering up her dainty dress, and poising herself on an unsawn stick of wood, "I've come for you. I want you to go to the temperance meeting with me to-night. Will you?" Sam looked first aghast, then amused. "Why," he said, "I can't go to them sort of things. It ain't no use. It ain't of any account." "Go and try one. I don't believe you have ever been. We are going to have singing. I know you are fond of music. I heard you singing 'Molly Bawn' this morning. I like your voice. I want you to come and help us sing." Sam leaned on his saw meditatively. "You'd be wanting me to sign the pledge now, I dare say, if I went there?" he said, inquiringly, with a cunning look in his eyes. "Why, of course, I should invite you to do so. Are you so afraid of a pledge that you won't even dare to meet one face to face for a few minutes? You won't be made to sign it, you know, if you don't choose to do so." Sam's voice took a plaintive turn. "It ain't no good for me to have to do with them kind of things, Miss Bronson. It ain't, truly. I'm nothing but an old loafer nowadays, and I know it, and I keep away from nice folks. I'm all gone to wreck and ruin. Ain't worthing taking any notice of." Dell stooped and picked up a chip, and broke it into little bits while she talked. "You don't mean a word of that, Sam, not a single word of it. If any one should say it to you, you would be angry enough to choke them. You know you are worth a good deal, and now and then when you look at little Mamie, you think that you'll never drink another drop of that horrid rum, and that you will work hard so that Mamie can have nice things to wear, and go to school, and have as good a chance as any girl of her age." She had tried him at a venture, and had touched the tender spot in his heart. He put up his rough, hard hand and brushed it across his eyes. "That's true," he said at last, "true as preaching. Sometimes I think I'll manage somehow to give her a chance. But then you see it's no kind of use. I can't do it. I've tried, and made promises by the bushel, and it never did the least mite of good. I've got to drink." There was a genuine plaintiveness in his voice this time, and Dell felt that it was time to turn comforter. "You've never tried the help that the pledge would give you," she said, cheerily. "Suppose you make a grand start, sign the pledge, and that of itself will give you strength, and then temperance people will know that you are trying, and we will all help you." But Sam Miller was not to be so easily won. He really wanted to reform, that is, now and then he did, when he thought of Mamie; but the wish was very weak, and wouldn't bear the test of a stern, strong effort. He turned from Dell, and took his saw again with a mournful shake of his head. "I can't do that. I know I wouldn't keep it, and where would be the use? I'd be worse off than I was before I tried." Dell decided to waive that part of the subject. "I've a very special reason for wanting you to go to the meeting with me to-night," she said, eagerly. "You see, we each promised last week that we would bring some one with us this evening, and now if you fail me I shall have to go alone, and I don't like to at all." Sam Miller turned half-way around again from his stick of wood, and laid down his saw. This was evidently a new phase of the question. The bright young creature before him had not been bestowing smiles and kindly words on him all the week for nothing. "Why, if it would be a kind of an accommodation like," he said, speaking slowly and in much embarrassment, "why, I suppose I could go." "It would be a real accommodation. I want to keep my promise, you know." "But you won't ask me to sign one of them pledges, will you?" "I'll ask you to, certainly, if I get a chance. But of course no one will compel you to sign it, if you really make up your mind that you won't." Sam meditated still further. "Well," he said at last, "you go on, and tell 'em your some one is coming. I'll come along that way by and by, I guess." "Oh, no," said Dell persuasively. She was very fearful of the attractions of the bar room that he would be likely to pass through. "That wouldn't be bringing some one with me. That's what I promised. I want you to walk down the street and into the church with me." "Well," said Sam again, giving his stick of wood an emphatic kick, and speaking with energy and decision, as if he had conquered an invisible foe. "I'll go, now, I'll be hanged if I won't." And he went. He shambled through the one long street by the side of the dainty, well dressed young lady, and more than one lounger at the village stores looked after them with curious eyes. The bell had ceased its clanging, and there was quite a little company gathered inside the church. Much pains had been taken to spread the news of the meeting, and curiosity had drawn in several who were not deeply interested in the cause. "There's 44 folks in the church this very minute," Tommy Truman announced in a very loud and very gleeful whisper to Dell as she entered the door. "There are! Isn't that splendid?" The young lady responded in a voice not so loud, but every bit as gleeful. Then Mr. Nelson made his way toward her. "Are the lamps better?" he asked gravely. "Haven't I improved in the art of cleaning and trimming them? Shall we open this remarkable meeting with a song, if we can get anybody to sing it?" "A great deal brighter, Mr. Nelson. The church really looks most cheerful. I should think it would be better to open with prayer." The serio-comic look on Mr. Nelson's face faded into one of perplexed gravity. "Why should you?" he asked, in a grave and troubled tone. "Why, I don't suppose it makes much difference which way it is," Dell said cheerily. "It only struck me as the most appropriate way. Would you prefer to sing first?" I had not thought it necessary to have prayer at all," he said hesitatingly. It was Dell's turn to look grave and surprised. "I confess," she said, speaking with quiet dignity, "that to me it seems almost, if not quite, a necessity. There is no one here to call on," giving a swift glance around the room. "Can't you call on yourself, Mr. Nelson?" "Not very well. I'm not in the habit of it." "Of praying in public, you mean?" "Yes, or in private either," he answered her quickly, with a slightly embarrassed laugh. "I don't wish to dress in sheep's clothing, Miss Bronson. I see you have mistaken my character." Dell was silent from utter surprise and disappointment; but Mr. Nelson almost immediately added in a relieved tone, "Oh, we are all right after all. Here comes Mr. Tresevant, and he has Miss Emmeline Elliott with him. I think she will play for us." And while he hastened to meet the minister, Dell slid quietly into a seat, still wearing her grave face. It had been a great disappointment; she had thought she had recognized one of the children of the King. Mr. Tresevant immediately went forward and offered a very fervent prayer. To be sure, he did not say the word temperance, but he slid around it and glided almost up to it, in that dexterous way that some good and skillful people have a habit of doing, who do not quite like to give a square utterance to the obnoxious word. After the prayer a great whispering ensued. Miss Emmeline Elliott was being coaxed to play; and she looked smiling and accommodating, and persistently shook her head. She had not thought of such a thing; she only came in for a little while as a spectator; she could not think of taking any part in the exercises; she hated to play on a cabinet organ anyway, and was not at all accustomed to it, Mr. Nelson knew, and that one was horridly out of tune; it made her teeth ache to even hear it, and, well, he really must excuse her. A timid girl in the corner was petitioned. She grew red from chin to forehead at the bare thought, and looked so thoroughly frightened that Mr. Nelson did not wait for the refusal. Several others were tried, with like results, Dell meantime looking on, half amused and half provoked. "What a time!" she said to herself. "Now why can't that man ask me to play? What is the use of his taking for granted that I can't do anything? I've a mind to offer my services. I won't, either. He might at least venture the inquiry; it wouldn't take long. Let him go without music, if he can't invite me. Now, Dell Bronson, that's a charming way to do. Your Uncle Edward would be proud of his pupil, wouldn't he?" The end of it was that she telegraphed Tommy Truman with her eye, and sent him after Mr. Nelson. When he came, looking greatly perplexed, and saying, "I don't see but we shall have to do without music after all," she answered, "If you would give me an invitation, how do you know but I would play for you?" "You?" he said, with a brightening face. "Can you?" "I can try," she answered, demurely, and without further delay she went forward to the instrument. She laughed a little inwardly at her position. It so happened that so far as being musician was concerned, the position was not at all novel. Even in cultured, musical Boston her playing and her voice were decidedly noticeable; and here were these people staring at her as though they could not recover from their surprise. Mr. Nelson brought her the old note book and selected the piece he wished to sing. "Shall I read it?" Dell questioned, and again he answered, "If you can." And then her fingers swept the keys. It was a different touch from that to which the wheezy old organ was accustomed, and it rolled forth grandly in honor of its player; and when Dell's rich, full, cultured voice filled the room, the squeak and the wheezing were alike forgotten. Lewiston had a surprise. Miss Emmeline Elliott straightened herself, let her lace shawl droop gracefully or otherwise as it pleased, and listened intently, discovering, while she listened, that she was no longer the player of Lewiston; that Dell Bronson, the tavern keeper's daughter, could draw from those disordered keys such music as she had scarcely ever dreamed of. The church windows and doors were wide open, and as the new powerful voice rolled out, passers by halted at the gate, listened, and by twos and threes strolled in. "Sing 20 verses, and for once in its life the church will be full," whispered Mr. Nelson, in one of the interludes, as he bent with shining eyes to turn the leaves; and Dell, singing on, just gloried in the power that God had given her, the power of song. Though she had sung so much, she had never realized the joy of her voice, the use to which it might be put, as she did that night. That temperance meeting was a grand success; there was much singing, Dell was not sparing of her voice, and it fulfilled its mission well. People gathered in, so that when dainty little Laura Tresevant, Dell's Peak acquaintance, came forward in her freshest white dress to recite her piece, she was half frightened at the rows of eyes gazing at her. She had been carefully trained, and her soft little voice was clear and sweet, as she commenced that most exquisite of child poems: "There's no rain left in the heaven, There's no dew left on the daisies and clover, I've said my 7 times over and over, 7 times 1 are 7. I am old, so old I can write a letter, My birthday lessons are done, The lambs play always, they know no better, They are only 1 times 1. O moon, in the night I have seen you sailing, And shining so bright and low. You were bright, ah bright, but your light is failing, You are nothing now but a bow. You moon, have you done something wrong in heaven, That God hath hidden your face? I hope if you have you'll soon be forgiven, And shine again in your place. O velvet bee, you're a dusty fellow, You've powdered your legs with gold. O brave marsh marybuds, rich and yellow, Give me your money to hold. O columbine, open your folded wrapper, Where 2 twin turtle doves dwell. O cuckoo pint, toll me the purple clapper That hangs in your clear green bell. And show me your nest with the young ones in it, I am old, you may trust me, linnet, linnet, I am 7 times old to-day." Tommy Truman did himself and his author credit. His round little voice rang clear and strong and indignantly over the wrongs and woes of a drunkard's wife. Mr. Nelson made a strong, stirring little speech, and then the singing swelled forth again. They stood together after the meeting, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Tresevant, Miss Elliott, and Dell. Mr. Tresevant was expressing himself neatly and kindly concerning the success of the meeting and the superiority of the music. "You have really given us a delightful surprise, Miss Bronson," and Miss Elliott chimed in, "Yes, indeed, I wasn't aware that you played or sang. You really sing remarkably well." Dell's eyes danced. She had heard comments on her music before, some of them quite equal to this one. "I wish I could have been surprised," she said, turning to Mr. Nelson. "I was in hopes that Sam Miller would surprise me by signing the pledge, but no such good fortune awaited me. Now, if I had been a girl in a book, how promptly he would have signed the pledge, and been a reformed man from this very hour; but being out of a book, and in a most matter-of-fact little town, I suppose I must bide my time. By the way, Mr. Tresevant, I don't see your name here?" "No," Mr. Tresevant said, flushing slightly, "I am not in a book either, and must, therefore, study my steps carefully." Chapter 9.